Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I am back with more exciting Battlytics action. Taking a look at yet another new sculpt tonight. This one was featured in the Hansen's Rough Riders Mercenary Force Pack. It's the one and only Penetrator. So this guy was built in 3053 and I believe it was featured in TRO 3055. It is a 75-ton heavy mech with a battle value of 1687. According to the lore, it was modeled after the Blackhawk Omni-Mech, so it features an energy-heavy loadout. Very exciting stuff here. So my favorite thing about this mech is that, of course, it has a standard fusion engine. None of that XL crap. As a result, it's not the fastest mech on the field at 4.6, but it does jump 4 hexes or 4 inches, so that is always helpful. It has 12 double heat sinks and 13 tons of standard armor, so it's 209 pips for a total of about 90.5% coverage. Now on the weapons loadout side, it does have twin ER large lasers, one in each arm, and those are backed up by 6 inner sphere medium pulse lasers. Now, not the best range on those medium pulse lasers. That combined with a lower speed is sort of an interesting combination. The ISER large lasers, not the most popular weapon, but I actually don't mind them. I know they get hot, but they're not too bad. I like the extra range. The 19-inch, 19 hex range there is pretty solid. Also defensively, this guy has an anti-missile system, so that does make it useful. And the persistency of this mech, if you look at the service history, again, it debuted in 3053. According to Master Unit List, this is still in service all the way up through the Ill Clan era. Aesthetically, we looked at this one in the render blender, and also when we did the Force Pack review. Love the way the new model looks. Very, very cool. If you have not seen that or gotten your hands on one, definitely recommend it. But let's see what Battlytics has to say about this design with those medium pulse lasers. Will it live up to its battle value or not? Guys, stay tuned. Battlytics for the Penetrators coming right up. All right, we are back here. We're going to start with the offensive benchmarks. Look at that! Look at that heat curve. That thing really can spike up quick once those medium pulse lasers come into play. If you're just alpha striking, you are going to cook this thing real quick. However, at that longer range, I guess anything outside of 6 inches before those medium pulse come into play. You can move, you can walk, you can fire both of the ER large lasers and only build up 1 point of heat. So you can do that pretty, for 4, 5, 6 turns even, and then lay off one of them and cool right off. But once those medium pulse come into play, you have to be very, very careful about what you're firing. I will say this though, if you do get in range and you can alpha strike, you can really dish out a ton of damage with this thing. For what I think in terms of an inner sphere mech, especially with the mod, right? The gunnery mod that you get the benefit from those pulse lasers. Anyway, so benchmark comparison. So baseline damage, that baseline is calculated if you try to keep the mech under 4 points of heat at all times. It does 156.9. If you optimize it and try to squeeze it for a little bit more heat without going too bananas, you can get 163.9. So it's a slight increase, about 4 to 5% there. And if you lay on the heat and you're at the red line, it's 125.2. What's interesting about that is even at like really high levels of heat with this thing, because of the pulse laser gunnery benefit that we just talked about, you can still manage to hit and do some damage, even if this thing is running hot. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of the lethality index, damage per hit isn't like tremendously high because, again, it's got a bunch of smaller weapons. The larges aren't bad either, but it's laying down 6 damage per hit. It's dealing above average on the critical hits. So our average we see is about 3 critical hits. This is doing 4.02. And that's just due to the fact that it has 8 different guns on it. So as you peel off armor, you're going to get more likely to generate critical hits. And then the time to kill 10.81. It's not tremendous. I think it tends to have more of a shotgun effect in Classic, again, because you're rolling 8 different hit locations. Even if you're hitting with everything, it's still kind of splashing around. And you can see that in the pie chart there, how it managed to kill its target. That javelin targeting dummy, 83.9% of the time it was a CT kill. So you're very rarely getting into the engine, very rarely head kills, right? Most of the time you're just peeling off layers and layers of armor. So it's good in that regard. It's not going to be the mech that bores holes in things, right? Like with your Warhawk style mechs that have these big guns, or your gunslingers and devastators and things that we looked at with Twin Gauss. It's going to be the kind of thing that just starts melting armor off. We'll talk about this in the role analysis, but I do think that this is very much like, I don't want to call it a light hunter because it's not really fast enough. But if your bigger fire support mechs, your slower mechs are getting swarmed by high TMM, even clan mechs like Stormcrows and things like that can generate a high target mod, a +3 or whatever. This can negate that with the pulse lasers and start to melt that armor off, which is fantastic. So anyway, moving on, we'll talk about defensive stuff, but on the offensive side, not disappointed, not totally blown away. I think the big takeaway is you got to be careful. This thing can get hot real quick with those pulse lasers. But onto the defensive side. So armor distribution is very good in this thing. We mentioned it has a 90.5% total coverage there for armor. It is virtually maxed out on the torsos. It's a little bit under on the rear, but right in spec with that 90% target. So very happy with that. I always like to complain about mechs that are over armored on the rear. I think this one has an absolutely beautiful distribution of armor. Maybe I would peel a little bit off the side torsos and put it on the arms, just because they're carrying those large lasers. But I think we're talking about nickel and diming pips here. So overall, very happy with that. On the mobility side, it retains its hit mod, its target mod rather, very well. Its average over the 12-turn simulation was 1.98. So it's almost retaining its maximum. And that's because in those legs, it does have jump jets, right? So they're going to take, potential, like it's 33% chance you're going to hit a jump jet, and only 66% chance that you're going to hit a, foot, upper, lower, hip actuator. So that's a good thing. That keeps the thing running. And I'd rather take a jump jet, lose a jump jet, than like take a frozen hip or something that could absolutely cripple the mech defensively and offensively, especially when you want it to close in this particular case. Survivability overall was 91.3%, which is absolutely terrific. And if you look, love it, engine deaths only 1.1% of the time. Most of the deaths, the 7.6%, was CT or head. So you really need to eat this thing up, right? It does have onboard ammo with the AMS, but that's very unlikely to kill you. So it is what it is here. I mean, this thing does very, very well in terms of survivability. So I guess the only thing I would say, speaking of the AMS ammo, my pro tip, assess your enemy force if you're not playing with, hidden units or anything like blips like we play with. Like if you know what you're going up against and there isn't a significant LRM threat, like all they've got is like a Vindicator with an LRM 5, or there's no SRM heavy mechs, just dump the AMS ammo. It's not even worth taking, or even if you start getting hit where that ammo happens to be located, just get rid of that and offload it. That's kind of how I would play that. I think that's sort of par for the course. Sort of like machine gun ammo. Sometimes just better off without it. But that said, let's take a look at efficiency and see how that shakes out. All right, so here we are on the efficiency side. So not bad at all. The survey says 6.65. That's respectable. It's not crazy above average. It's not really below average. It's pretty solid. I think it has a very reasonable BV at 1687. The one thing I will say about this is that you can run it at gunnery 4 or gunnery 3, and I think you get results out of it only because the pulse lasers are there. They are tough to get in range, and if you have a crafty opponent that kites you, you're gonna have trouble. You do want those ER large hitting at range, but you can see on the efficiency analysis on the top left that effectiveness, the bulk of the damage that this thing can do is at short range. You're not going to get your return on investment if you play this thing as like a sniper and just expect, the ER large are going to do, enough for you. You have to get this thing in range. You have to get those medium pulse lasers in the fight, or this thing is really just worthless in that regard. I mean, you have to get that weaponry in play. So let's take a look at the gunnery sensitivity. That's in the center there, 0.36. That's extremely low. And that speaks to my point about playing a pilot with lower gunnery. It's because it has the pulse laser benefit there. If you increase the gunnery, you can see it almost flatlines after 2. You're really getting minimal increases. You do get some juice out of the ER large lasers with a better pilot, but again, the bulk of your damage is coming in close once those medium pulse lasers get into range. So important note there, if you are going to play this thing, I would play it with a lower gunnery score. A higher gunnery score, a crappier pilot is what I meant to say. And I would play it, basically get it in range. But let's talk about rolls. I've been sort of hinting around it this whole time. Let's look at the threat analysis and talk about how we might use this thing on the battlefield. All right, so here we are, roll evaluation. Put it in 3 roles here. First and foremost, Brawler. Second is Vanguard. And I put second line, and I'll tell you why. That was sort of a stretch for me. Brawler and Vanguard are pretty obvious. I mean, the thing is tough. It's survivable. It's a zombie mech, right? Especially if you factor out that AMS ammo or dump it or you use it up early. It's not going to die in some spectacular way. You can rip off arms, side torsos. This thing will still be viable and in the fight. The closer you get, the better. And you can see in the threat assessment at the bottom, once you hit 6 inches, your alpha strike capability like skyrockets, I believe. So 52 at 6 inches is what we're talking about here. That's very, very high. Conversely, it can build up 25 points of heat in one trigger pull. But we talked about that. You have to be wise when you pull that trigger. And if you pull all the triggers, you have to be very, very careful. So Brawler and Vanguard are pretty obvious, right? You want to get in close. That's how you maximize this thing. The reason I put second line is, my thought pattern there was, you can get some mileage out of those ER large lasers. You can use it to defend against swarm mechs or those flanking fire moths or all those other annoying little threats that exist on the battlefield. Like if you want to protect your longbows or things that are maybe, slow but are devastating at long range. This can kind of run almost like an escort. And then once the enemy is softened up or those smaller threats are eliminated, or maybe they don't materialize, you can move this thing in to closer range. So that was my thought pattern there, almost like maybe Picket would have been a better sort of description, but almost like an escort type mech. But the key is you have to get it in close, right, to get those points. So either the enemy comes to you and you're able to, to deal with them in that defensive capacity when they attack your fire support line, or, even if you have like a back line of long toms, for example, something like that. I think this could be useful there. So that was my thought pattern there. But I think primarily the use case for this mech is you get it in as quickly as possible. It becomes a bit of a fire magnet, but that's okay because it can soak damage pretty well. And then you get your return on investment, God willing. So one other thing I want to point you to is the ACD cap. Now this is calculated. The higher the better. So 100% is perfect. But the ACD cap is basically like if I roll all of the dice at a given range, right, based on the modifiers and things like that, what's the percent damage I could expect to deal based on the mathematical maximum. And in this case, the mathematical maximum is 52, right? Adding up all the pulse lasers, the 2ER large, you get to 52. So this thing can do 48.3 points of damage at 2 inches. That's our average calculated damage at 2 inches. That's very, very high. And again, that's thanks to those pulse lasers dropping that target number down. So that's pretty good. So closing thoughts on the Penetrator. I'll give you what I think. One, it looks awesome, and because of that, I want to field it. I already painted one up in my Etrian Knights / Avatar Knights, depending on what era I'm playing in. I guess it'd be Avatar Knights because this is after 3050. So the Avatar Knights color scheme, which is exciting. So I hope to get that on the table soon. But you know, from a numbers perspective and from a Battlytics perspective, I'm fairly pleased with this mech. I mean, there are probably cheaper choices at 75 tons. You know, the Marauder comes to mind. There are about 8 trillion different variants of Marauders that, you know, for my play style, have better range and a better mix of weapons that I like, and are a little bit cheaper too. But they don't. They all have ammo. You know, they don't have that sort of zombification survivability. The only one that does is the Black Knight. I'd have to look up the point value. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I want to say that the modernized Black Knight or the Star League era one with the ERPPC and so on and so forth, I think that's fairly high. Let me see if I can pull that up right now for you guys. So this one, yeah. So I think what is that? The 7, the 9. So that's only 12. Oh, it's 1678. Yeah. So it's similarly priced, actually. That's pretty interesting. So that's the only mech that I could think of, right? And that's got an ERPPC, medium pulse lasers, a large pulse laser, a Beagle active probe, double heat sinks. This one has the hatchet. That one's 1678. That's funny. And yeah, the Royal variant 1600. So all of these Black Knights that are competitive are generally in the same price range. So I guess in that regard, you know, price wise, it's pretty good. I don't know. What do you think? Leave it in the comments. Tell me if you like the Penetrator. If you don't, tell me if you've used one and how it worked out for you. Very interested to hear that. I've actually not ever used one on the table, but I'm very excited to do so. So very interested to hear about your experience with this mech. Now, that said, a couple of things before we wrap up. Number one, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, click the little bell icon so you get the notifications. You know, leave a comment, as I mentioned. Definitely love to hear what everyone thinks about the Penetrator and DFA at large. Other than that, check out Aries Games and Minis. Derek is great. He's got all of the packs in stock. He's got Felder cases, Piranha, Fighting Piranha graphics, hardware studios, all the good stuff. So head on over there and you will get great prices and great service. That said, I'm all done with this Battlytics review. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.